you have to go do your exam basically in another country where it's allowed to do it. I think something like that, which I presume means Scotland. I don't really know.
Welcome to Game of Nodes, a weekly podcast on the cosmos from independent validator teams.
Hello, and welcome to Game of Nodes, a weekly podcast on the cosmos from independent validator teams with a little. I don't know how I didn't spot exactly when you rugged me there, so presumably a little bit of an anti-monarchist diatribe there involving medical exams being rescheduled, which I read about in this week's Private Eye, which is, if you are British, a magazine you should subscribe to. So yes, I was reading all about it in Private Eye, reading about all of the costs associated with the royal burial, whatever it's called, and
is that what it's called?
Fucking who cares, really?
The royal burial.
They did exactly the same thing here. They just rugged us with a fucking public holiday, and they put it on a Thursday, so everyone took off Friday as well. So everything's fucked. Larry is here. He's showed up.
All right.
Hey.
Add him in.
That was
just
sorry, mate.
In the nick of time.
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry, man. I looked at the thumbnail and I was like, "What is she?"
Yes.
Nice hair, dude.
Hide the KFC bag. Welcome, Larry. So I was the other two were just like, you've not sent the link, have you? You fucked up something. This is on you. I was like, I'm pretty sure I was actually organized this time, squared away things ahead of time, all perfection. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, welcome.
Sorry you missed the pre-show shit talk and chit chat. But yeah, so pulling us out of the fire of having to come up with a new topic on the fly. So thanks very much for actually coming.
Which, to be fair, is not very difficult for us to eventually just end up talking for 2 hours anyway. Might have. Do you have sketchy internet, Larry?
No, looks good.
No, I think it might be you in Kangaroo Town.
Yeah, probably. I'm in Melbourne, and I've got to tether to my phone because the internet here doesn't seem to work. So thanks, partner. You've got shit internet.
What you're telling us is that when you were in the actual outback, you could do the podcast from a hut in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. I'm not exaggerating, by the way, to listeners of the podcast. We have reasonably good geographical understanding without doxing Null of where he is at any given time. He has a tracking beacon on him. The rest of the Game of Nodes team, we just follow him. We just see it on a world map, which bit of Australia he's in. So he was, if you've ever seen the film Crocodile Dundee, basically Null has been on walkabout, which is, it's obviously a completely factual thing that happens in Australia. But okay, this is getting a bit racist. But anyway,
so last week I was literally in the middle of fucking nowhere in a caravan, and
with good internet.
I had great internet, thanks Elon. I've got the Starlink hanging off the side of my caravan, and I'm sitting on 250 megabits up and down, and now I'm in Melbourne, in the city, and the fucking internet doesn't work. I'm tethering off my mobile, so it's a little bit in and out.
Devastating stuff. So we obviously are a validator podcast, and I get that you the other two of you on the panel today are going to be like, why do you keep inviting Cosmwasm devs to come on talk? But Larry does validate Osmo, right? So we are well within the remit of a validator podcast on this guest choice. So maybe we can talk some validation stuff later. But so for those of you that don't know, Larry does a load of stuff. Actually, to be fair, where do you start? Like, obviously you've got so what's your involvement with like Delphi and stuff like that? Do you work for them? Are you like just a contributor and stuff? Because you run a validator, do a bunch of Cosmwasm stuff. You've just launched an NFT POAP style project on Stargaze, which obviously Usurper helps out with Stargaze, very interested and involved in that project as well. So I don't know, Usurper, you might already know more about that than I do. I only saw it with the GovProp the other day and was like, oh, isn't that Larry's thing? And then I just read it and was like, okay, I really need to pay more attention. But good timing to be coming on the show, having just essentially put up a new project on Stargaze, which was very exciting. So, yeah, probably rather than me go down your CV and ask you about each individual thing, Larry, do you want to just introduce yourself and like what you work on and how you spend your time?
Yeah, sure. So thanks for having me. So I'm commonly referred to as Larry.Engineer, which is obviously not the real name, but this is what I go with. So I'm currently working primarily at Delphi. Or it's Delphi, not Delphi actually, but even our founders pronounce it wrong. So
I kind of assumed it was a pun because, like, obviously the Greek would be like Delphi, I guess, but I assumed it was like Delphi, but like Delphi, but like DeFi.
Yeah, that's what I thought, but it turns out Americans they don't.
That is literally how I would pronounce it, is Delphi.
Yeah,
like Delphi.
Okay.
Delphi.
I don't know.
Delphi,
it's confusing.
Yeah, it's from Greek, right?
It's where the oracles were, isn't it? It's like the it's the in Greek mythology. It's the Delphi is like you there's all sorts of gods. There was gods and demigods. They climb up there to get like a, you know, they just got told something horrible is going to happen to them, don't they, by the oracles of Delphi?
Yeah. Right. So where was I? So I'm technically a contractor to Delphi. So they hire me to do engineering works, and I do engineering work for them. And my primary project here is contributing to Mars protocol. It's a lending protocol. If you're new here, we launched on Terra Classic back in March, and it went pretty well. We had $200 million worth of TVL, and until everything crashed, and right. So obviously we're not going to give up everything we've built. So we're taking this as an opportunity to basically reimagine how we can build this protocol based on our experience on Terra Classic and everything we've learned about these recent new Cosmos technologies. How we can combine these experiences and build something new, more exciting. And we came up with this new, what we call an outpost architecture. I guess I shouldn't distract. I guess this is a validator podcast, not a DeFi podcast. But if you're interested, definitely tune into our presentation at Cosmoverse.
This is a everything podcast.
Right. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Noel's big into DeFi. He's a massive degen.
Okay. Yeah. So Mars protocol is my primary thing. I also run validators on Osmosis and Stargaze. So I run validator if I really like a project and I want to contribute to it, and validating is just one way for me to contribute other than building stuff on top of the project. And I can make some money, so why not? So besides, I had a personal side project, a fun project. It's called Badges. So there's some historical context in this. I initially launched Badges, initially called Terra Trophies. So trophies as in, PlayStation trophies, video game achievements, right? As a project on Terra Classic. So it used called Terra Trophies. I launched it right before the last Cosmoverse here in Lisbon. So about a year ago. So at the time, nobody knew who I am. So I went to Cosmoverse. I tried to tell people, hey, I have this QR cool NFT drop. You scan it, go away. So nobody knew me, and I'm not good at business development. So nobody knew about that project. It went nowhere. And then Terra collapsed. I kind of forgot about it. So recently, I met a few other people who wants to drop NFTs, and then I remembered, hey, I had this thing back last year. So I just revived the project, and upgraded Cosmosm to the latest version, added some new features, and deployed it on Stargaze. So yeah, that is the story.
That's pretty exciting. Oh, so obviously, Stargaze is permissioned. So presumably, at some point, you how did you go purely through the community route, or did you talk to we obviously know Jorge and Shane and stuff. We've had both Jorge and Shane on the show, and Meow as well, I guess. So we've had all of them on at one time or another. Like, what was the process like for getting that project deployed on Stargaze?
Well, for my case, I already know the Stargaze team, so we're already friends. So we talked about it. We reviewed the code. We had a session where we just go through the code. And then I just went ahead and make the on-chain proposal. Everybody vote. That's pretty straightforward. Yeah, at the same time, I also did a few PR to CW NFTs and Stargaze repo because I don't like their code. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've been. I think I saw some of your comments on CW NFTs because there's an ongoing discussion about design on a number of different angles. I think for some of a lot of the CW sort of boilerplate repos, if you like. There's I don't know. Well, I'm quite interested what you think actually about this, but I think it's kind of interesting where they've got to and like the adoption they've got to. I think I surprised somebody that I work with the other day by pointing out that most of that is actually unaudited code, and they had assumed that it was, audited and very canonical. And I was sort of like, no, it's just that they're all just examples. I mean, they're production ready because they are in production. People have used them. They've had a lot of eyes on them. A lot of people have thought about them. But most of them are unaudited at this point. And I'm also not convinced that every single one of them is that idiomatic in terms of Rust. It's certainly not that idiomatic in terms of Rust as an ML family language with like pervasive immutability and a lot of those kind of concepts. So but they're already quite solidified, despite them all being basically alpha software. They're all still quite solidified, I think, in the minds of the maintainers. And as a maintainer, I'm also just like, let's be careful about changing it, even if there's some bits that I'm not 100% on. So I don't know. It's quite interesting to think about what we might do differently. I think on a lot of those contracts that are now so widely used, because a lot of people now depend on them in production, right?
Yeah. So I'm a fan of object-oriented programming. So I personally like the way it is, but I do have friends who are like functional guys who absolutely hate it. So I can definitely see both sides. My opinion is that the CW721 base should be absolutely minimal. So currently there are some proposals to introduce some extra features such as the collection level metadata. I think I'm not a big fan of it, to be honest. I think it should be CW71 base should be really minimal. So if I'm running a project, I do want to introduce the collection level metadata. I can do it myself, but if I do not want it, I don't think the base contract should force that onto me, right? So that's just my opinion.
Because I guess there's two things there, aren't there? It's like I think it's not immediately obvious when you look at that code base that the thing that makes it, well, the thing it is like the type of CW721 is like the enum, basically the JSON part, the interface bit, and then like how you actually go about implementing that is maybe a separate thing. And like you say, you can kind of implement your own extensions to it quite easily as long as you keep that base bit.
Yeah. So if you look at my contribution to the SG721 design, so it basically uses a pretty typical object-oriented inheritance pattern, and I think it's pretty elegant way of extending contracts.
Yeah, I think I've seen that, and it is clever, but I think we've talked about this online, that I'm kind of the functional programming extreme. I think the way I would be interested in seeing and implement, if I had the time, I would do this, is actually refactor it into a example contract, so like you can see how it's used, and actually make what's currently contract functionality just a library, like a package. So you'd have like base package, blah, blah, blah package, blah, blah, blah package, like the various extensions. You can just decide, mix and match the functions you want to make up an enum with the right signature. And then the contract is basically just an enum where you say, look, I am telling you that I am this enum, which again would be in a package, because obviously. So you just say, okay, well, you can tell from my interface, the contract I'm going to give you as somebody trying to communicate with me, this is my contract. But how you implement that, so long as you return the right thing, is completely up to you. And you can mix and match which functions you want, so that the end result is probably a contract that's basically an example contract is basically just like one match statement for the 3 entry points, just saying, cool base execute blah, base execute blah, base execute blah, and that would be it. But I don't hate how base is currently implemented. Like, I get that if you like traits and you like essentially having static objects, that that is fine. I spent a lot of time with Ruby and Rails, and static objects are also very, very common in that paradigm too. I just think I'm not really smart enough for object-oriented code. Do you know what I mean? I feel like it closes over a lot of functionality and state within these objects, and then I have to be like, oh, what's this thing, and I just feel like I'm probably just not smart enough for OO code. That's kind of my general takeaway from doing this for 10 years.
Yeah.
So Larry, back to badges real quick. So that's totally permissionless to be able to create a badge, right? So anybody can mint a badge set. Is that right?
Yeah, it's totally permissionless. So the way it works is that, so currently, if you have a collection of NFT, it's a separate contract. So like Bad Kids NFT, that's a contract.
Sure.
Stargaze Punks, that's a contract.
Yep.
So the way badges works is there's just one NFT contract for all the collections. So if I create a badge that is called badge number 1, that is a sub collection of the NFT contract, and someone else can come and permissionlessly create their own badge, and that would be badge number 2, and they will live in the same NFT contract, but they will have different metadata and different rule set. This rule set includes whether the NFT is transferable, what are the rules by which the NFT can be minted.
Okay.
Right? So we have different mint rules for different use cases.
Okay. So I'm not creating a collection of badges. I'm creating a badge, right? And then as an owner, do I have the ability to distribute those? Or is it more contract based where you can make it like more smart contract based on a certain criteria? Or how do those things get distributed, or how does somebody pick up a badge, or how do I give somebody a badge?
So if you're a creator, what you need to have is you need to prepare the metadata, so including the name, description, image, URL, etc.
Yeah.
And you upload those things on chain. You need to define a few things, such as whether this badge is transferable, whether it has a max supply, whether there is a deadline for minting.
Okay.
So this kind of data. And the most important thing is you need to define a rule on how this badge can be minted. So there are 3 options currently implemented. One is called an airdrop. That's the easiest. So if you already have collected a list of addresses of recipients whom you want to mint this badge to, you can just tell the contract, these are 500 people, just mint 500 badge to them. So that's an airdrop.
Okay.
The second way is called using a single use, a multiple use key. So you will generate a private key off chain, and you will upload the the corresponding public key on chain.
Okay.
So the contract will have that public key, and then you can distribute that private key off chain to, for example, you're hosting an event.
Yeah.
You can print out that private key as a QR code, and everybody can just scan, and with that private key, they can go ahead and mint a badge.
Okay.
So I think that's pretty suitable for off-chain events, right? So
Yeah, that's
you have
awesome.
a check-in, right? Yeah. So the third approach is similar, but a badge can have multiple private keys. Each can only be used once. So this is actually what we plan to do at Cosmoverse. So when you check in at Cosmoverse, you will be given a little piece of paper with a QR code on it, and you can just scan it and mint your exclusive Cosmoverse badge.
That's awesome. And where can I view those? Is that only on the Stargaze app, or where will that end up? Or will that show up maybe in Kepler at some point? Or what do you think that's going to, where should I be able to view those?
So they will be minted to your Stargaze address.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure how well. So Stargaze team is working on integrating it in their marketplace.
Okay.
I'm not sure how soon they will finish it.
Yeah.
I haven't worked with Kepler yet, so they have to put in some work to support it. So
Right.
yeah, so I don't know. Maybe you will be able to see it in Stargaze Marketplace, depending on how fast they get it done.
That's cool. I mean, it's NFT-ish, but I like the distribution, especially options 2 and 3 there, where that's, kind of taking the wallet aspect of it and being able to distribute the private key as a QR and those types of things. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that idea actually came from Dave from Osmosis. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's really nice. Like that's something where to be able to have an event, or maybe like we drop one in here or something else for some episode drop or something else, or I want to. And then so since it's permissionless, any image, can I burn a badge that's been assigned to me? So if somebody creates a giant douche badge and then drops it to my address and they go to the Stargaze page and it's a can I burn my own?
Yes.
Okay. All right, let's check it.
Yes, you can burn my own. Yeah.
Okay, good.
That's why Noel's so quiet. That's what he's doing right now.
He's checking right now.
It's actually really hard for me to participate in this conversation because I've got a bad connection to Larry. So whenever he's talking, a lot of the time I can't hear what he's saying. So I'm just sitting here with no fucking idea what's going on. And I was actually just fixing a secret node as well.
to be honest, I'm doing the same thing, except I have perfect video and audio. So that's really cool.
Yeah. I'm
that,
actually gonna just turn my camera off, and so
that might be
you aren't
better,
all
actually.
looking at my ass. And I'm just gonna see if I can mend the internet. I'll be back.
That's cool. So Larry, that's currently Stargaze proposals 52 and 53 that end tomorrow, around midnight Eastern, or a little bit before that, I think. So those look like they're right now. They both met quorum and they're both very positive. I assume I saw that you also posted some ways for people to inspect the contracts and other types of things if they wanted to, which is really cool.
Yeah, I mean the contract has been open source since last Cosmoverse, right? So anybody can look at it.
That's awesome.
Nice. I feel like I might have even seen that at some previous point. It's hard to say. There was definitely a point when, especially around last Cosmoverse, when there were still so few CosmWasm developers, maybe outside Terra at least, that it's like, have I seen that repo before? Pretty sure I've seen that repo before. So one of the other questions I had, Larry, was like, you posted some interest. This was actually one of the things that I was most interested maybe in getting you on to talk about originally when I first was like, do you want to come on the show? Was you posted some stuff about how essentially your thesis on what the dividing line is between like decentralized applications that are built on CosmWasm and like app chains, and like what the sliding scale is between those, right? Because it's fair to say, is it that you're relatively involved with Osmosis in that, you've got a validator there, you believe in the project, that sort of thing. And yet sort of like, Mars is going to be its own chain, right? But there's going to be like outposts on other chains. Have I got that correct?
Yeah, so Mars will be will have a chain, but the actual lending protocol is not on that chain. The actual lending protocol will be deployed as outposts, which are WASM smart contracts on each chain.
So is this some of the, because I've seen you posting on Twitter some information about like experimenting with ICA and that sort of stuff. Is that underpinning that functionality, right?
Right. So governance will be on the app chain, but the lending market will be on Osmosis, etc. So there has to be a way for the governance module on the app chain to control the outpost contracts. So that is what that ICA thing is about.
Right. So is there any interaction between the governance module is just using the app chain's native tokens for staking and that sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
So what's the imagined utility of the tokens on the app chain, or is it just simply that they need to be used because on the other chains it's that IBC denom that will be used to do operations?
So you're asking about the Mars token, or?
Yeah, so like I guess I'm asking, like, if you have a standalone app chain, but a lot of your functionality is actually taking place on other chains, like what does that mean for the utility of the underlying token, and like what are people going to use it for, and how does that interaction like work? What kind of mechanisms are happening? I'm just kind of like, I guess, both technically, architecturally, and economically, it's quite an interesting use case given how early we are in like ICA and all that sort of stuff. So I'm kind of interested how that kind of all thrashes out.
Yeah, so I'm not sure how much I'm allowed to say at this point, but a lot of things will be unveiled at Cosmoverse. So
damn, so we're basically like a week too early to get all the juicy all the interesting details.
I can talk a few things about how it worked on Terra Classic, and that can maybe can give you some expectations of what you can see.
Sure.
Right. So on Terra Classic, we didn't have an app chain. Obviously, we have everything implemented as smart contracts on Terra Classic. We have our token as a CW20. We have our governance as a contract as well. So this is how the token worked on Terra Classic. So our idea is that you can stake your Mars token, and that will grant you a share of the protocol revenue, right? But and governance power in the protocol. But we believe that token holders should have more skin in the game. So they shouldn't be just like buy a bunch of token in the market, they stake it and make a really bad governance proposal, screw up the whole thing, and just leave, right? We cannot let that happen. So in order for the token holders to have more skin in the game and incentivize them to make more responsible governance decisions, the idea is all staked Mars tokens, in case there is a so-called shortfall event, meaning the protocol becomes insolvent, there are more debt than assets, there's a shortfall, in other words, a portion of the staked Mars token can be auctioned off in that case to cover the shortfall. So if the token holders vote to list a very risky asset, like list a stablecoin and the stablecoin DPAX, for example, and we lose a bunch of money, the protocol doesn't have enough assets to cover all the debts, obligations it owes to the users, these Mars token stakers will lose a portion of their assets to cover the shortfall, and they will take the hit. So we believe this will incentivize these Mars token holders to be more responsible in making these governance decisions.
That's really interesting.
This is the idea for Terra Classic. We still really like the idea. So there are a lot of complications applying this to an app chain model. For example, now if Mars token is the proof of staking token, you can't just auction it off because that will risk your chain's security. Right? So it has to work a different way, but it's the idea. It doesn't change that token holders should have more skin in the game, so that they are more responsible than in governance.
So what motivated the decision to move from sort of like decentralized application running on one chain to being like an app chain plus outpost model? Because it's quite a big architectural change as well, just from the difference between those two things, right?
Right. So we all love IBC, but the truth is, composing smart contracts on different chains is still quite challenging, especially when it comes to time-sensitive tasks such as liquidations. So if you have some portion of your protocol on one chain, some portions of your protocol on a different chain, and you need to liquidate some users on one chain, and that involves multiple rounds of cross-chain communications, that's very complex. And if let's say IBC channels gets congested, that could lead to massive loss in value, right? So we believe at this stage, a lending protocol is still better to be deployed locally on each chain where it is used. So if there are borrowing demands on Osmosis, we will deploy our contract there. If there are borrowing demands on RHINO, we may consider deploying one there, etc., etc. So this is in contrary to what UMI does, where they have one app chain where the lending market is, and everybody who wants to borrow needs to IBC their assets to UMI chain, borrow there, and IBC their borrowed assets out, right? So these are two contrary models. So I think at least in the short term, I think our protocol will be more composable and we'll see more usage, we think. In the long term, it's hard to say. It really depends on how IBC evolves, but probably the difference will be smaller, but let's see.
So the app chain is forgive me if I've misunderstood, but it's more of a kind of things are locally where they should be in terms of like whatever assets are being deployed, but then the app chain itself is there for operations that aren't time sensitive or anything that you want to route specifically through that chain, presumably. I can think of use cases for that, but I don't know if that's the reason.
Right. So the app chain, in summary, it will be the governance hub that controls like parameters of each outpost. Stakers will collect protocol revenue on the app chain. In the future, we may think of something similar to what we did on Terra Classic, that kind of tokenomics.
But the majority of the functionality is actually happening elsewhere, right?
Right. So there are some possible use cases for other use cases for the app chain, such as what I'm thinking right now is something like a cron job scheduler. So if you want something to be automatically executed once every hour, that can be scheduled on the app chain using the begin and blocker feature. And it can use some interchain account or some other mechanisms to execute those tasks. That's one thing the hub can we call it the hub, the Mars hub, something that the hub can potentially do. I'm also pretty ambitious that I think Mars hub can be an interchain security hub. So maybe we can take some job from Cosmos hub.
So is the kind of substrate of that chain, is it based on just like a WASM-D implementation, or is it based on sort of osmosis? Because osmosis is WASM-D. The way they have it configured and stuff is quite different from how RHINO uses WASM-D, which is closer to a reference implementation. And then obviously there's T-Grade, which is a chain that uses TWASM, which is a third version of WASM-D with additional functionality, let's say. So out of those sort of 3 implementations, or some other one, like which one is Mars closer to? I mean, if that's a thing that you can even talk about, I don't know.
I think it's closer to RHINO except for its permission.
Right, so similar to Stargaze and Juno then.
Yeah, we customized very little things. We customized the governance module. We have a different logic for tallying governance votes. But other than that, most of the things are just vanilla default wasn't stuff.
Right. Okay. So, again, I guess out of curiosity, you presumably did some of the Go work around the SDK yourself, right? As part of that team.
Yeah.
What did you do? You prefer working on smart contract stuff, or do you prefer working on like the SDK stuff?
But I like both. But I think they're different. I think I find fun in different kinds of fun in both of them. So when working with Go SDK code, you have access to much lower level stuff. And with that, you can achieve a lot of stuff that aren't easily achievable with WASM, and that's pretty exciting to me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but then you could, I guess there is an option to potentially look into like TWASM type stuff, because then you can, use smart contract type bindings in, begin and end blockers and that kind of stuff, which I guess, I suppose it depends again how deep you need to go, right?
Yeah.
So
for us in the future, as mentioned, we probably are going to do some pretty in-depth modification to the staking and governance modules to implement our tokenomic stuff. So that will have to be done in Go, right? If you want custom staking, custom governance. Right?
Sure. So in on the validator side of things, like you're only validating Osmo and Stargaze, right, at the moment. Do you have any other? Do you have any other projects that you're looking at validating?
Yeah, so quite a few ones. I'm a big fan of Say. I don't know if I'm going to validate it because their validator has very high requirements on hardware specs and latency, connectivity. My validator is just a home computer right there. I'm not sure if it will satisfy the requirements. So I don't know. Maybe I'll give it a try. But if I'm missing 30% of the blocks, I will probably give the spot to someone else.
Say requirements are a bit of a. We've talked about it a little bit before. There's short block times there, and even right now, there's not a ton of transactions. So we'll see how that does after the transaction load goes up and whatever else. But yeah, we miss a decent amount too. I think we were just looking like we missed 40 a day or something like that, which is ridiculously
40 a
high.
day. That's really nice.
Yeah, it's actually it's decent on the Say network, but it's like we have some dedicated hardware to it that we would not do anywhere else, but it's even on a test net. But yeah.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of Celestia.
Yeah.
I think Penumbra and Noma are quite interesting as well.
Yeah, Penumbra is very, very cool. Not sure like how. Yeah, don't know about Penumbra is very, very cool, but I don't know. Well, number one, like we obviously haven't been super involved in testnets, so I don't know if we'd be eligible to validate if we jumped into the stage anyway. But also, it's one of those where it feels like maybe you're painting a bit of a target on your back by validating it. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's like a privacy protocol to begin with. So you're sort of like, well, if you want a peaceful life, this might not be the one to validate.
Well, I'm not living in the US, so that's a great thing. I know. I mean,
Yep.
I know other like America-based validators. They seem to be much more nervous about regulation-related stuff than I do. So,
It's true.
yeah.
Yeah, it's still very boys be boys here, but that will change at some point, I suppose. So, out of curiosity, like because obviously you've said that you're obviously working in the Terra space last Cosmoverse, which was like a year ago. But like, how long have you been working in crypto, and like, what was your in?
Yeah. So I'm relatively new here. I think I bought my first Bitcoin in April 2020. So that was right after the March crash. So I bought ETH at about $200. So that was a really good deal, but that was pure luck. So I didn't even know there was a March crash. I did not even know we were in the bottom. I didn't even know. I just
bought some and it panned out okay.
I didn't think about it. So I came from a science background. I spent 9 years trying to get a biochem, well, 4 years in undergrad, 5 years in grad school, trying to get a PhD in biochem and get a developer job in the big pharma, Pfizer, Merck, those companies. It went nowhere. Like research not giving results. Like job perspective was really bad. Doesn't look like I will find a job. And there's the immigration issue. So like America's immigration policies is not very favorable. Sometimes it takes up to a decade for you to get a permanent residency, and you just have to continuously renew your 1 year visas through all those years, and there's no certainty in your life. Like you can't buy real estate because you buy a house and they cancel your visa and you're screwed. So that's kind of the low point of my life, where I wasted almost a decade in science, research not going anywhere. I'm not going to get a job. Like, even if I get a job, I have up to a decade of uncertainty in life. So,
right.
So I just decided at a point, I'm just going to quit. The crypto I bought at the bottom is doing pretty well. I'm just going to full-time crypto.
Nice.
Yeah. And
nice.
Yeah.
So you're potentially the biggest degen here then.
Just aped into it big time. I mean, you wouldn't be the first time that someone has wasted a decade. I've definitely wasted a decade. I can tell usurpers wasted a decade.
just by looking at you.
We've already talked about your Crocodile Dundee past now. Everybody knows about that.
The phrase wasted a decade watching shit movies.
Only watching good movies, mate. Only watching the best.
So, Larry, I might have actually missed earlier on. So I'm getting much better connectivity now, by the way. I can hear everything you're saying in your videos, not dropping out at all. But I was curious, like, where do you hail? What's your country that you live in? If that's not too doxing.
That's fine. I'm originally from China, but I'm in Portugal.
Oh, you're in Portugal? All right, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
I think, that's actually not too bad a place to be in terms of being able to, interact with the crypto community. Particularly, it's not so far away when you want to fly anywhere. Certainly, it's a problem for us it's a problem for me if I want to go to any of the degen gatherings. I have to.
Well, everywhere's a problem for you, mate.
Yeah,
You're
I know.
in Australia.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I realize I'm on a fucking island.
Colombia's pretty close to you in the grander scheme of things, but You know, you're not going there.
No, well, I mean, it's a long way away in a plane still. But I want to actually try and get to this.
South Korea was maybe like Hackathon was in South Korea. That's about as close as it's going to get to Australia, isn't it?
Yeah, that's not too bad in Asia. But it was like bad timing. But I'm trying to do some forward planning, and wouldn't mind getting to East Denver. Should be good if we can get there. It's like not massively Cosmos related, but still should be a pretty good gathering there.
Close enough.
But not Cosmos related at all, in other words.
Yeah, well, it might be something that the Evmos people would be at, so at least
yeah, I guess that's possible.
there'd still be some of us attending. But anyway, that'll just get me over there, and I'll be able to come visit people. I'll just like rock up at Usurper's house.
Yeah, we're only 6 hours away from there.
Yeah, I was going to say it's only the other side of the country.
That's literally like I do that drive on a Sunday afternoon just to go to my mailbox.
Man, England is so small by comparison. I have to get a train at the weekend, and everything is still fucked because everything is breaking down here at the moment. Like there aren't enough train drivers. There's barely enough bin men. Like it's really 1970s shit right here right now. And I'm going to I need to get this train from this place to this place. It's quite a long trip. And I was like, fuck, if that train gets cancelled, I'm fucked. And I was like, hang on, no way, England's really small. I was like, how far actually is it? Like, if that train gets cancelled, I get totally fucked. I need to be in this place on Monday, right? The train is on Sunday afternoon. I was like, it's actually only 180 kilometers. And then you're like, that is long to ride on a bike. That is 8 hours of non-stop cycling.
Yeah, not impossible.
Right. But I know I can, I know I've done that before. So I'm like, it would be annoying to have to cycle that with my laptop and all my shit to basically go to work on Monday. I would not, anybody who saw me on Monday, I would not be a fucking happy bunny. Do you know what I mean? But I will get there. So, yeah.
So it
just puts it in perspective. You're like, basically, how the fuck do you get to England? If you've got a pedal bicycle with you, you could probably get to your destination if you're bloody minded enough. Even France is way too big for that.
From my house,
England's just tiny.
From my house to my partner's house is a 12-hour drive.
Jesus.
That's from the north of England to the south of France. That's how far that will get you in Europe. That is crazy.
I do that drive for a long weekend. Like it's I mean the difference is it's probably a similar cost now to flying too, because flying, I just flew here yesterday from a place on the coast, and it was $1,000 return. And to drive, so it's about 2,000 Ks return. So I don't know. It's
1,000 one way.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's about.
Holy shit.
It's probably a bit more than 1,000 one way, but it's It's So that would be about, I don't know, $600 or $700 in fuel anyway at the moment. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's a big country, man. It takes a long time to get from A to B. But I'm quite used to just jumping in the car and driving like 5 or 6 hours, though, if I want to go somewhere.
Yeah, we do that. I mean, we do that too. I mean, 6 hours from here. I mean, we're in New York or down Tennessee or something else. Like, there's a lot within 6 hours here. But I think there's a lot to do also less than 6 hours away, which I think that's the difference here, right?
Well, I guess
like what are you staring at for 6 hours?
Yeah, exactly. Like I guess the difference is that I'd do that for a weekend. You probably wouldn't just drive 6 hours for a weekend.
Right.
Yeah. Like
that's probably fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yes.
We're now just talking about Noel's commute to work.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yep.
So
we certainly are.
My bad.
So I want to bring it back to some of the questions we had for Larry.
That's a good idea.
Get us back on topic. But so like Larry, the other thing that I was kind of interested in sort of having you on the show to talk about is that you've come over from the Terra ecosystem, I guess, when that all collapsed. And so you kind of have like, I guess you've had enough time to land in Cosmos now that maybe now maybe the time to ask you this would have been like a couple of months ago when you were like, whoa, okay, this is really different. But like, what's your perception on like the things that Cosmos does well and badly? And like, there must be some like things that you see, based on some of the stuff that was really, really well worked out in Terra, let's say. There must be some stuff that you look at in Cosmos and you're like, that's just like a huge, that's just like absolute low hanging fruit. That's an opportunity that just nobody's taken, kind of stuff.
Yeah, like one thing I keep wondering is what took so long for Cosmos to make their own stablecoin. Well, there still isn't. Well, we have USK from Kujira, but other than that, there's like no stablecoin in Cosmos.
Yeah, there's no back stablecoin.
Noel's getting ready. He's like stablecoin. Don't talk stablecoins.
No, I mean,
Yeah,
the fact that there's one that's not properly backed, that's not a bridged coin, is really, really annoying. But yeah, continue.
Yeah, that's definitely a low-hanging fruit. So I think one thing Terra did really well is they have these, what I would call first-party protocols, where the developer of the chain, Terraform Labs, they would sponsor, they would lead developing a number of protocols. Like they had Anchor, they had Mirror, they had Nebula protocol, which didn't manage to launch in time on Terra Classic. They have Ozone, which was supposed to be an insurance protocol. So you may say some of these are Ponzi's. Well, some of definitely do have Ponzi elements in them, but they did indeed have very good user experience, and
that's how you get the most out of your Ponzinomics.
Yeah, I think Terraform Labs definitely did a good job, like leading these protocols to like bootstrap their ecosystem. So
there were just like a lot of projects in Terra that were even just had seed funding from Terraform Labs too, right?
I'm not aware of that, to be quite honest.
I've talked to a few people. Sorry, I've talked to a few people that said that they were, they basically had like seed funding out of some fund in Terra, and then hired these enormous teams of people.
Well, I definitely don't remember any of the projects I'm involved with received TFL money. Like, at least I personally don't know. But
were there other, organizations in Terra that were doing funding? Maybe it was some other organization in there. Because Terraforms wasn't the only one with a big cache of like Luna, right?
Yeah, so like, I guess what I meant to say is that, let's just say Juno, right? I feel Juno doesn't have an entity like TFL to lead develop DeFi protocols on top of it. Like we have DAO, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, but I know what you mean. There's no cashed up wallet that's like going out looking for specifically like leading development out of that organization. They sort of are funding a lot of development, but not really like actually leading it with devs and creating the direction that they're going with certain dApps or anything. Like there's nothing like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think just funding is not enough to attract developers. Like developers nowadays can, like many different chains have fundings, right? You can get funding on Avalanche, you can get funding on Polygon, you can get funding on Near. So Juno is not particularly attractive just by funding. So what Terra had was, Anchor had 20% yield, which in retrospect definitely is not sustainable and borderline counterable. But that 20% yield is an excellent DeFi building block, and a lot of things that are simply not possible on other chains are possible on Terra, given that yield. I think that is a much bigger incentive for developers to build on Terra than a foundation gives out some funding, right?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. But at the same time, it was a Ponzi.
Yeah.
So the funny thing about that is like at the time, like we retrospectively look back at that and go, oh, geez, that was a Ponzi. But like at the time, I knew it was sus, right? But I still used it. I just used it sparingly, just to park stuff and then clear it off. But like, what was the feeling of everyone else? I know I asked a couple of times around our groups, but you know, it'd be like, doesn't UST seem a bit sus? And then everyone would be like, yeah, I suppose, you know, probably is a bit sus with that kind of return on a stable coin. And then everyone's like, Anchor. just go there anyway. So how did you feel about it? Like when it was like, did you ever go there and deposit money and go, doesn't quite seem like this might be the safest thing to do?
Everybody knew that the 20% yield wasn't real. Everybody knew that it's not generated from real organic borrowing demand, and that Terraform Labs was burning money in that so-called yield reserve to sustain 20% yield. But the argument at that point was that for a new tech startup, at that point of development, it's normal for a tech startup to burn money, right? Like Amazon at its comparable stage was also burning money. And I would say probably Microsoft, Apple, Google, they were all burning money at that point.
I don't think they're like, to be honest, completely comparable, because when you look at like, you know, tech startups that lose money, they're losing money to create a user base on like mostly it's like a freemium type tier system where they start off free and then they start bringing in premium features, and then, you know, it becomes sort of part paid, part free, and supported by advertising, right? I don't think that's like completely comparable to what Terra was doing, because when you look at Terra, that was their core product, was something that loses money, and there was no way to turn that around to something that doesn't lose money unless they hit a critical mass of users in the borrowing department, which to be able to give a 20% return would mean that people borrowing the money would have to be putting in more than 20%. And I don't think that was going to be feasible in the long term anyway. Why would anyone go into the...
Well, I criticize that. I remember I wrote a tweet thread on that as well. So it wasn't a secret, but at the time, the expectation was that the protocol design will adjust in the future to become sustainable. And at that point, the money burning to keep this thing 20% was a short-term measure to get a bigger user base and achieve network effect, right? And actually, before the DPEG, work had already been done on improving Anchor. There was a governance proposal on Anchor regarding a so-called I forgot the exact terminology, but the idea is there should be a free-floating interest rate instead of...
Yeah, it was like the save Anchor proposal. I saw it come through.
Yeah, so the idea is like every month or so, the interest rate will be adjusted based on the supply and demand at the time.
Yeah, so someone did a massive write-up on it. I read some of it because I was I didn't even really understand the voodoo behind Anchor at the time. So I was like trying to find information on it, and that's when I saw that come up. And there was a lot of thought put into that, but it never really got action though, right? They did reduce the return at some point from the Anchor. But
yeah. So the return was already lower than 20% at the time. So and it was supposed to keep going down. So yeah.
Yeah. So, but at the same time, like all of the reserves that were feeding that were all from gains in Luna, right? So yeah, it was easy to see that once the price of Luna started to turn back after the hype train finished, it was always doomed. But it's easy to say that in hindsight.
Yeah. Well, in hindsight, basically everything that could go wrong went wrong, and everything that TFL could do wrong, they did it wrong. Like,
Pick all the wrong things and then do them.
Global macro was the worst, as bad as can be. Macro condition was as bad as can be.
The comms was as bad as could be.
Yeah, macro was terrible at the time. Anchor's protocol design was not also, like we were saying that if Anchor had a withdrawal lockup period that like maybe have a 7-day lockup period, nobody would be able to dump all at once. Then
or you could at least see the cliff coming anyway.
The burn and mint could have been able to absorb the selling pressure if the selling pressure like comes up gradually over some weeks instead of all at once. Luna probably could have absorbed that selling pressure and keep UST on peg.
No, I don't know, man. So like Luna was already on a slide. It might not have been like completely obvious, but it had been drifting down trending for like weeks before it actually fell over.
Yeah. So another thing people said was LFG at the time was selling all the assets they can to buy UST to keep it on peg. What if they had taken a different strategy? What if they don't throw away all their assets at once, but just allow UST to be pegged for some time, let the market to calm down, and then buy back later? Will that work? Possibly.
I think they did that to a degree because there were some pretty like obvious lines in the sand where they were defending price points. But from what it looked like on the charts when they were going down, like they'd try to defend, for example, 60 cents, and then it got broken after a while, and then they'd go back and defend like 30 cents or whatever. It did look like they were doing some defending at certain price points, but I think at the end of the day, there's just that much pressure on the price that it was just too hard to hold.
Yeah, well, I mean, the general idea is that there are a lot of what ifs. What if Anchor didn't have 20%? What if it was like 4%? Right? What if Anchor had a withdrawal lockup period? What if TFL took a different strategy at the time? So there were a lot of what ifs. If some of these what ifs were the case, it might not have collapsed. So.
Well, it might not have collapsed so spectacularly.
Right. So.
Yeah.
So my sentiment is that Terra is not a scam. It was a legitimate project. Its economic model could have worked if some of the things were done right, but it wasn't done right, and it was done wrong at possibly the worst time given the global macro. And this collapse sets back stablecoin many years, and it brought a lot of regulatory pressure for all stablecoin developers. So it's
yeah. In my jurisdiction, stablecoins are literally the only thing that's regulated, or that were going to be regulated, and that just made it like the legal advice was like, don't fucking touch anything that looks like a stablecoin. You're like, cool.
Got
noted. Will not be touching anything that looks like a stablecoin. Thank you very much.
In what way do you mean, like touch it? As in use it, or
as a developer?
Oh, okay.
As a developer,
right.
Yeah, build one.
Or potentially even a validator. But again, it's so early that the rules around that are not clear. But in the UK, anything that's basically, if you end up in like a regulated area, at the very least, you usually have to register as like an entity carrying out interest in a regulated area. So basically, if anything goes wrong, they can come knock on your door. And then it goes from there, depending on what you're doing. Like, obviously, you want to start a bank, that's like peak regulation because you can issue credit and stuff, and that's like a really big deal. And then it kind of goes down from like, oh, I just want to have a cash card to, I just want to do some financial tech stuff to, I want to do crypto shit. Nobody cares. Somewhere in the completely unregulated bit down there. But yeah, stable coins are going to be like at some, I would be very surprised if it doesn't happen pretty soon, actually. Because it's all about consumer risk here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing is consumer risk.
Yeah, exactly. And that I think the funny thing about Terra in that regard is I think like put stable coins big on the agenda here. And they already kind of were, like the regulators were aware of them, blah, blah, blah. But I think it also maybe made everything else seem so risky that it actually took the edge off of regulation in a weird way.
I feel like a lot of people didn't know that UST was like an algo stable, regular users.
Yeah.
Like Titan was in recent memory as well. Like it was not that long ago. And then for UST to fall over as well, like are there any other algo stables left? Like DAI?
Well, there's some coming, aren't there?
Yeah, well.
Yeah, I guess DAI, one that isn't USK algo.
Mm-hmm. It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
So they, I've seen talk about over collateralized, coins as stables, but I mean, that only works until the underlying asset is so battered that it doesn't work anymore. And that will happen at some point. So
yeah,
I don't know how they can work.
Pretty hard to say. Anyway, that's we obviously we started a little late, but Larry, thanks very much for joining us. Sorry about the little bit of confusion there at the start. It was great to have you on and talk about quite a wide range of things in the end, and maybe we'll have you back on at some point when you've recovered from this ordeal. Are you going to be in? Somebody was asking in the comments who is going to be in Colombia. Are you going to be at Cosmoverse, or are you keeping it in sunny Lisbon?
I will be at Cosmoverse, and actually, I haven't finished the Badges front end web app yet. So I guess I have 2 more days. Get it done. So yeah, I'll be pretty occupied.
If you go to Cosmoverse and you don't manage to get your hands on a badge, then you now know what Larry looks like, so you can come find him and complain about when badge, because I'm sure Larry will really, really like you doing that. Right, cool. Thanks very much, Larry, and we'll catch you soon. All right.
So honestly, I have no idea what the fuck Larry was talking about most of that. So I was getting like such piecemeal parts of the conversation. I was like, I don't know what the fuck's going on.
Well,
because your internet.
Yeah,
that's kind of part your internet and part perhaps not understanding the ins and outs of the epic holy war between functional programmers and object-oriented programmers, which
isn't so. JavaScript's like, OOP, right?
JavaScript is a prototypically inherited object-oriented language with first-class functions. So it has some elements of a functional programming paradigm in it, and its object model is really unusual.
So hang on,
because it's prototypical inheritance.
Did anyone tell Larry that we just boot them off after an hour and see you later?
No. No.
Well, that's why I didn't just rug. I said thanks for being on the show, and then we'll see you later.
He's kind of hanging out
And then-
down here, though.
That's the way to do it. That's okay.
It's like,
That's okay.
why
You
did
probably
they
forgot
drop
we're
me
still
off?
connected.
So,
that's okay.
FYI, Larry,
This is what the pre-show is.
you ain't
this is what-
coming back, bud.
This is what the pre-show is for.
Yeah.
Which we did not do.
Yes.
So right, yeah, I think Hjormund in the chat. Sorry if I've pronounced your name wrong. Said he's planning on yelling "when badge" whenever he sees Larry
Perfect.
in Cosmoverse, which I assume means he's going to be at Cosmoverse. So before, like, I feel like Noel now he's thought about stable coins again, wants to get back into it.
Oh man, I'm
But-
so
but-
massively fucking tired. It's like really hard to think.
Me
at the
too.
moment.
But we've got to talk about Wake and Fright. I know that Usurper hasn't finished it yet.
I have not finished it. I'm
But
at the good
Film
part
Club,
though. Yeah.
Film Club homework was the absolutely insane Australian cult film Wake and Fright.
If you want a spoiler, you can sound the horn and you guys can talk about it. That's totally fine.
I'm not going to spoiler, but you've seen up to the kangaroo hunt, right? Usurper?
Yeah.
So, so those of you who are watching along, you're like, what is he talking about? Kangaroo hunt. So I've been told, like, I haven't. So with the caveat, I've not fact checked this, so this could be incorrect. At the end of the film, there is a big disclaimer about this kangaroo hunt being a licensed event because apparently it's a big deal. Can't just go shoot kangaroos.
It was the 70s, man. It was-
Maybe you could just shoot kangaroos in the 70s, but there is a disclaimer, right?
So we
But
we
apparent-
have tags, right? So over here, if you want to go shoot kangaroos,
Sure.
you have to tag them
You get tagged
afterwards, right? So farmers can get certain amount of tags for because for most property owners, kangaroos are actually pests, right? Because they destroy all
they're
the
destructive,
fences,
aren't
and
they?
there's fucking tons of them. And so they'll just go
There's loads
around,
of them.
and as they see them, they'll just shoot them and put a tag on their tail, right? So that's how it works. So
Yeah.
Okay.
So what I'd heard anyway is that they were like, right, we want to do this like license hunt, have it all above board, and insofar no cruelty to animals. Maybe it doesn't look that way on film. And what happened was the people who were doing the hunt had a few beers, a few Castlemaine 4Xs.
probably a
As
lot of
one
beers.
would.
The funny thing, I didn't recognize any of those fucking beers in that movie, man. They're all done.
Yeah. They're all, and they kept referring to a specific brand of beer as well.
Oh yeah,
and it
it's just
blew
everyone was
straight over my head.
pumping that one beer, and I'm like, what the
Yeah,
fuck
what's
is
in
this?
yeah, little amber lager
like
or whatever.
Yeah.
It looks refreshing.
And they had it coming out of a hose. It was literally like a hose. They were just like at the bar where it was like coming out of a hose where they just put it right in the glass. It was like no tap. It was just like somebody just got a hose.
Just cracking on.
Yeah, move on.
Hey, you know how in Belgium, like there's a kind of old fashioned type of beer that people are into where it's like a spontaneous ferment. It's very acquired taste. But how that used to work was they would literally have a barrel on the bar,
Yeah.
and then it would just be like, "You want some? Bam! There you go. There's the house brew." I think that's pretty fucking cool, actually.
Just dip your head in, or what? You actually
Yeah, you just put your head straight in the top.
just dump
Like
it right
a wet dog. It's like that Simpsons joke, with the is the red tick beer, where there's like the Duff Brow, and then there's the red tick, and then there's just dogs swimming around
Oh,
with
yeah.
the red tick, and then needs
Yeah.
more tick.
Yeah.
It's kind of a
So I
kind of
thought
old-
one thing that was striking about that Wake and Fright movie, I just haven't come across any movies from the 70s that are like so seemingly progressive in style, I guess, of that show than like the similar like other offerings in that time period. It was like a very different format and storyline than most things that you would pick up from
Anything
the
else?
70s. Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't seen anything from the 70s that was in that style.
It's apparently a classic of Australian cinema as a result. Like it's like if you go look up its like Rotten Tomatoes review, despite it being a weird, difficult,
It's
and
really
somewhat
high, right?
scarring film. Yeah, it's got like 85% on Rotten Tomatoes. Like
Yeah.
there's all this stuff about it being like the beginning of the Australian new wave of cinema and stuff. Like presumably whoever saw it was as freaked out and as like whoa about it. I mean, it's one of those films, when you're like, it's impossible not to have a reaction of some kind, and this film will stay with you.
The
That's
the
how I
cr-
feel about that film. for better or
the-
for worse.
Of the 59 critic reviews on the tomato meter, 97% positive from critics and 83% from the audience, which is 97% has to be up there. Like there's not much that has that level.
That's high, you know.
It's ridiculously high, yeah.
But I mean, I've had a fucking nightmares about that film. It's brilliant.
The funny thing is, like, the part that you're, the parts of that you're thinking are like probably, really theatrical.
Yep.
Is probably like back then, if you were a country boy out like, west in Queensland or New South Wales, like on a property or a station, it's not that hard to think that some shit like that might have gone down on a regular basis. Like, even when I was a lad, like I can remember getting hammered drunk and shooting kangaroos when I was a kid. So
yeah, and that whole heads and tails game, I was like, this is some high level of competition here.
Yeah.
But I could totally see that happening, right?
That had to be almost. I wouldn't even be surprised if that was actually a game
real.
that was going on.
Yeah.
And they literally went, "We're going to film, lads."
Yeah.
Oh, there is
that's called
one
Two
scene.
Up. That's called Two Up, that game, right? And we still play that here on Anzac Day at RSLs only. It's you're not allowed to play it any other time except for Anzac Day at RSLs clubs.
Is that what do you mean? There's like Two Up police that patrol the neighborhoods looking for people playing Two Up? What do you mean you can't play it the other time?
Well,
you could just do it at home.
Well, you could do it at home, but at a licensed establishment, it's illegal to play any other time except for Anzac Day, which is like a Memorial Day for the wars.
No shit.
Yeah.
So were there licensed Two Up locations? There must have been.
I presume back in the day they used to just play that shit everywhere, and then
that's crazy.
They probably went, well, I don't know if
Is
there's
that a picture of dogs playing poker on your wall, RHINO?
Yeah, there is.
That's a classic. That's a classic
photo. I'm
I'm
aware it's like a classic thing, but I just never looked at that that wall before. And I was like, how I missed that this entire time? Like, what, 29th episode? 29th episode, I didn't even see that you've got the dogs playing poker.
I think I'm going to change it to dogs playing Two Up.
I mean, I thought it was actually just a legit photograph of Jabby's place on a Saturday afternoon.
That's what they're doing at the weekend for fun. So yeah, somebody also told me that I don't know which one of the bar scenes, but one of the bar scenes it is just filmed in a place, and they just said for the next half an hour we're just going to pay the bar tab lads, and it's filmed in like a mining town, and they just went, just don't look at the actors. No, don't look at the camera. Don't look at the camera,
right.
But you can look. Right. You can do whatever you want
and just drink.
And so it was on like a bank holiday or something like that. I don't know, like the exact specifics, but
seems pretty legit.
But that's why it makes me think that maybe the Two Up game was also just happening. like,
oh yeah, let's film this.
I imagine there would have been like a lot of takes, maybe, with people like looking at the camera going, or just people randomly walking in and be like, what the fuck's going on here?
Donald Pleasance is such a good actor too. That guy totally stands out in this movie. That's the kind of crazy old guy who, walks around with his shirt off all the time and all that. I don't know if everybody knows who he is, but he was in The Great Escape.
The one with the daughter?
He was in The Great Escape. No, the other crazy old guy.
The one in the shack?
Yeah, the one in the shack. He's like, use the bathroom outside. Then the guy goes out and takes a piss. He just stands there and watches him. Yeah, man. He's in the Great Escape, and he was in one of the Bond movies, right? We were talking about before. Dr. No, maybe?
He's Blofeld in Bond, yeah.
Yeah, I forget what movie that was. Now I can't. Somebody answer it. But he's just a great actor. Totally makes that movie.
To anyone who hasn't seen Wake in Fright, just go and watch it. It's fucking out there. Yeah.
What are we doing for what?
It's one of the films of all time.
I also watched
feel like we need
Idiot
some
Box
homework
as
for
well.
next week.
I'm not sure who mentioned that last week, but I went and watched Idiot Box. I'm sure someone mentioned it. Another Australian film from, judging by the quality, maybe the early 90s or something. Late
They all
80s.
kind of look the same. It's like, all Australian films I know have a slightly fucked up storyline, which is good. That's a good thing. Everybody's sweating because it's always hot. Like everybody's
Just
sweating.
Shit.
everybody's sweating the whole time. And there's a slight yellow tint on all the film. That's what it is. It kind of looks like that's my Australian.
It's got that Australian tint. I mean, there's a slight yellow tint on my camera here. So
yeah, see,
don't know. Maybe it's
no joke.
Just the hue of the wallpaper we like to use shines on us in a yellow light.
It's just the sun's a little bit different or something.
Yeah, but that was like that's got some actors that are still active, so it's like it can't be that old.
Idiot Box.
Yeah.
1996 by the look of it.
96. Yeah, it's still a good film.
One. So, we're gonna have to self rug at some point soon because we've got a hard stop, haven't we? But there's been a fair bit of just on. I'm not aware of like there's obviously been like Sif chain stop.
Yeah.
Evmos took a while to get rolling on after its upgrade, but it's back up now, right?
Yeah, so the
Evmos
upgrade, there was a lot of people who were having a long time to upgrade, right? Some were there early and signed the block, but then there was a fucking bug after it. So with the new binary, you can't have any pruning now. Otherwise, it has like a pruning error. That usually we used to get that same pruning error when you were trying to do snapshots, and your pruning schedule didn't agree with your snapshots. You used to get the same error, but now you just get that error for any pruning. Weirdly, it came up on different blocks on different nodes of mine. So, some made it a fair way along and others didn't. So it was a problem for me because it was in the middle of the fucking night, that upgrade. And then so I saw everything was fine and went to bed, and I woke up to like, people yelling at us on Twitter or whatever. But
as usual.
Yeah, so we fixed it. It wasn't a problem to fix it up. We just had to find out, what the fix was.
What the hell's going on?
Yeah, so it was like, a bit chaotic before this stream, just trying to figure out what the hell was going on. And so I think you're in the same boat, right, Usurper? You were like, thought it was okay, and then your node started to drop off with this panic.
Yeah, it looked like it was doing all the right things. It was dialing and it was kind of waiting for consensus, and it was doing fine. And then I already had all my pager duty stuff turned off because I know it's in a shit state. And then I guess it started moving, but I was not signing because of this. The node was still running, so I didn't have a process error. It just wasn't following the chain. Like it just threw that weird error.
Yeah,
so,
that panic. Well, mine kept restarting.
Yeah, threw panic. Oh, it did? Mine wasn't. It was just running. Like it was dialing fine, everything fine. I had to go back and query the logs to see where the panic was. It was like 30 minutes before I saw it. So, but anyway, whatever.
So I didn't have actually, now that I think about it, I don't think I had warnings about my daemon not running or restarting. I think it might have been, that it was just stalled. But it was, I don't know, man, because I was reading errors earlier on, and it seemed like it was running and then stalling, and then I don't know. I just figured that people were having trouble getting consensus because of the startup errors that have been. But it's been, man, it's been a fucking rough day, because there was Evmos, there was Say, which was a bungled upgrade because of a tagging issue, and then there was another one yesterday as well, which I think also got fucked up. So.
Yeah, I know people struggle with Secret.
Yeah, right? So Secret I had a problem with as well.
Yeah.
I can't even remember what the problem was now. I think I just state synced both my nodes and they were off and running again. But there was some.
So maybe next week. So maybe next Wednesday we just need a bitch about stuff episode.
Yeah. I mean, I was traveling yesterday with all these fucking upgrades, and I was having to pull over the side of the road and do stuff. Have you ever tried that? Have an SSH session on airplane Wi-Fi? It's not great.
Yeah,
I have pushed code during the first RHINO crash from under the channel, which is the
in the channel.
Oh, right.
From the tethered Wi-Fi that you get on the Eurostar when you are under the sea.
Like a Bond villain, like Blofeld yourself.